Hey, welcome to my channel where I teach the Bible. I hope you'll subscribe and hit the bell to make comments, give me thumbs up. All those things help the algorithm get it out to more and more people, which is the idea. Want to teach the Bible to more and more people. And this is the main message for the day for Monday, the 19th of December 2022, and I call it Just Shadows. It's from Hebrews 10, 1 through 10. From time to time, I'll run into someone who thinks that they're required to keep the law of Moses to be saved. Typically, they don't really understand what's going on, but sometimes people will think that. Galatians 5:1 is a place where the Apostle Paul refers to the law and that we are free from it. We're free from the law. Galatians 5:1 says this, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." Meaning, don't go back to the law and be put into slavery to the law. You've been set free from that by what Jesus paid for you. See, the law enslaves while Christ frees us from that law and frees us from the slavery of that law. So what did the law look like when it was operational in the Jewish temple? What did it look like? Let me tell you what it looked like. It was a mess, okay? You had animals like bulls, sheep, goats being slaughtered, yelping and carrying on as their throats were cut. There'd be blood all over the place. The priest would be cutting up dead animals and burning them as sacrifices on the altar. And it's a great big operation, huge. The temple would be a stinking mess, okay? It would stink of burnt flesh. And then the next day starts all over again, okay? And then once a year, they have the annual sacrifices that roll the sins forward for a year, but they always have to start over. They have to start the process over. Why? The offering just rolled the sins back for a day or for a year, and then the sacrifices start all over. All that was a shadow, just a shadow, but not the reality. The reality is found in another place. Look at Hebrews chapter 10, verses 1 through 10. I'm going to read those verses together. "The law is only a shadow of the good things that are coming, not the reality themselves. For this reason, it can never, by the same sacrifices repeated endlessly year after year, make perfect those who draw near to worship. If it could, would they not have stopped being offered? For the worshiper would have been cleansed once and for all, and would no longer have felt guilty for their sins. But those sacrifices are an annual reminder of the sins, because it is, listen to this, it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. Therefore, when Christ came into the world, he said, 'Sacrifice and offerings you did not desire, but a body you prepared for me. With burnt offerings and sin offerings you were not pleased. Then I said, Here I am. Here I am. It is written about me in the scroll. I have come to do your will, O God.' First, he said, 'Sacrifices and offerings, burnt offerings and sin offerings, you did not desire, nor were you pleased with them, although the law required them to be made.' Then he said, 'Here I am, I have come to do your will.' He sets aside the first to establish the second. And by that will, we have been made holy through the sacrifice of the body of Jesus Christ once for all." Notice that all those sacrifices repeated year after year, endlessly, will never make people who come to worship perfect. It will never make them acceptable for God. If they worked, they would not have been continually offered. They wouldn't have to keep doing it. They didn't work. It's like, that's how I'm thinking about it. It's like a spark plugs in the old internal combustion engines. I worked on them in the 60s. They lasted 2,000 or 3,000 miles, and you had to replace them, okay? Offerings, the same kind of thing. They last for a while, and then you have to do it again. They worked for a while, and then you had to be redone at least every year, and some of them had to be done every day. Notice that verse 4 says that it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. But God had a better plan, a plan that would work, a plan that was the real deal and not the shadow of the reality. The law was the shadow. The reality was found in Christ. The better plan was Christ coming into the world to do God's will. He affirmed that sacrifices and offerings don't please God, but Christ came to make the shadow into a reality. Christ comes to do God's will. He came in to do God's will, and he did God's will. And he set aside the first covenant, the old covenant. That's the shadow of the law. Put that aside. And Christ came to establish the second, not a shadow, but the reality. It's a covenant of grace, where we're forgiven based on what Jesus paid at the cross. Christ came to do God's will. Verse 10 gets at God's will and the reality that is versus the shadow, okay? That's the opposite of the shadow. Reality is the opposite of the shadow. It says this, and by that will, Christ coming to do God's will, we have been made holy through the sacrifice of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. No more sacrifices. No need for that. Jesus accomplished God's will by being the sacrifice that makes us holy, free from sin, and complete in Christ. Once for all. Once you come to that, it's settled. The shadow became reality in Christ. No more bloody messes on altars. Jesus did that once and for all at the cross. We are made holy by his sacrifice forever, forever and ever. Flee the law. It's just a shadow. The reality is in Christ's sacrifice for us. Hang on to that and don't let go. I will talk to you soon.